feeling day. 2 or 3 for many across the north, maybe 5, 6 or 7, and perhaps a little higher in the far southwest. Milder air nudging back in here on Thursday, bringing some wet weather, damp and drizzly. The possibility of some sleet and snow, mostly over the moors in the southwest. Further wintry showers in parts of the east. Again, it could be icy first thing in the morning. But again, for many, it's a dry and a bright day, but it will again be on the cold side with temperatures mostly around 3 or 4 Celsius.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's on your teeth.
It's on your teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Polly Middlehurst in the GB newsroom, and the news tonight is 12 newly freed hostages have arrived in Israel and they're on their way back to their families. Their release marks the 5th day of an extended humanitarian truce between Israel and the terror group Hamas. The Israeli Defence Forces say those freed from captivity include 10 Israelis and 2 Thai nationals. The 75-year-old mother of a British Israeli man is among them. We're also hearing 30 Palestinian prisoners have been released. They're believed to be 15 women and 15 teenage boys. Meanwhile, the United States has changed its approach slightly, asking Israel today to take greater care if there are any future strikes on Gaza. The White House saying earlier on that civilians and vital infrastructure must be protected. Now, in news here at home, schools could be forced to stay open during strike action under tough new plans to be introduced by the government. Teaching unions have attacked the announcement as shameful, but the Education Secretary said the recent strikes by teachers have been some of the most disruptive on record. A total number of 25 million school days being lost in the last year, something Gillian Keegan says we can't afford to repeat. Rates of shoplifting are on the rise, with the sharpest surge seen in Conservative constituencies. In 2014, the Conservatives changed the law to reclassify the theft of items under £200 as low-value shoplifting. It meant some police forces disregarded that as petty theft. The first transatlantic flight, powered by cooking oil and animal fats, has landed in New York. The Boeing 787's journey was the first time a commercial airline had operated a long-haul flight entirely powered by so-called green fuels. Aviation enthusiasts are celebrating the milestone journey, but environmental campaigners have cast doubt on today, questioning whether alternative fuels really are 100% sustainable. And snow and ice are set to hit parts of the UK overnight. Yorkshire is already seeing snowfall, and the Met Office is predicting a cold snap as we head into the early start of December. A yellow weather warning is in place until tomorrow morning, with hazardous conditions to continue in the northeast of England and parts of Scotland. And lastly, some households will be rewarded with cash for reducing their energy use between 5 o'clock and 6:30 tomorrow, according to the National Grid. Their forecasts suggest electricity supply could be tighter than usual during that upcoming cold snap. It marks the first time the Grid's voluntary blackout prevention scheme has been activated this winter. They say the move doesn't mean electricity supplies are at risk. They just want people to use power more wisely. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Thank you, Polly. Hello and welcome to Headliners, your nightly run through the next day's newspapers with 3 top comedians. I'm one of them. I'm Leo Carson. Tonight, I'm joined by Perrier Award winner Scott Capurro and Perrier water drinker Josh Howie. How are you both doing?
I'm still angry about it. I'm all right. Oh, thank you. I'm fine, thank you. Sorry, we have builders in today, so I'm covered in dust. I'm a bit spacey.
You had to be there during the building?
Always.
Right.
Yeah. You know, you have to watch every move they make, right? And he'd come the other day and I wasn't there, and the knobs didn't match.
Oh.
So we had to match our knobs.
Right. With the builders. OK, I won't ask what that entailed. Let's have a look at those front pages. The Daily Mail leads with Scobie book pulled for naming royal racist by mistake. The Telegraph has patients at risk from virtual GP sessions. The Sun has, they stole her voice. That's one of the hostages taken by Hamas. The Mirror has book names royal racist. The Eye leads with Jenrick goes rogue with dig at number 10 over migration. And finally, the Daily Star has you're a daft pair of witchetty grubs. And those were your front pages. And let's have a closer look at those front pages, starting with Wednesday's Eye News. Josh, what have they got?
Jenrick goes rogue with dig at number 10 on migration. And this, by the way, I always thought rogue was pronounced rough. Because do you ever remember Rogue Trooper from 2000 AD? Anyway, whatever. Basically, I learned last week there's Rogue. This is the immigration minister who seems to be very angry that he has not managed to cut down on migration. The figures revealed last week is 700,000. There seems to be a bit of a hoo-ha where people have said, is he stepping out of line because is he blaming everybody else, which is seen as a no-no, and also a sign of things to come as we're moving towards an election, is sort of our Tory ministers going to start sort of losing their discipline and start kind of all catfighting.
They're sort of plotting for what comes next, what comes after the election, which they're already assuming they've lost, it seems, Scott.
I don't know. I think the migrants are missing a trick, because I think if they're going to come over and they come from nice places, even if not from nice places, they should bring something with them that we want. You know, I don't know, something like
knobs,
iPhone
builders,
all that, I mean, I read that one of the biggest complaints is about Bulgarians coming to this country. That a lot are coming in, but we have Bulgarian builders and they're really good. So I think if they come over with a skill or a meal, they can make this nice, or they can sew clothes together. I don't know, make little iPhones with their tiny fingers, something that we need.
I mean, I guess it's just the numbers, because I mean, I know the net migration figure was 750,000, but the gross figure was 1.2 million in a year, which is insane. Obviously, you know, 500,000 people left Britain as well, which brought the net figure down, gives us the net figure. But 1.2 million, you know, new people arriving in the UK doesn't seem feasible.
Are a lot of them
sustainable as a sort of long-term? But even students have to live somewhere. A lot of people use the student visa as a way of coming in and working. I mean, I did it when I worked in Canada, and then they bring their family. I didn't bring my family. I was trying to get away from them. But I mean, are you surprised that, you know, the immigration minister is coming out now and saying nobody listened to me? Nobody listened. It's like you've had enough time to be listened to. Maybe you could put your foot down a bit.
Well, he's seen as an ally of Sunak, but this seems to indicate that he's actually moving more towards the Braverman side of the party.
But should he not have already been on the Braverman side?
Well, he's saying that he's been thwarted, and the stuff that he was promoting would have been pushed through last year if they'd listened to him, like last Christmas.
Which is pretty much what Suella was saying.
Yeah, but they are tricky because we do need students. We do need their money to subsidise our universities. Yes, we do.
How do we survive before students?
Well, we paid more money towards our universities.
Oh no, paid more money? No, we didn't.
Yeah,
I went to university in the 90s. I got paid to go.
No, I mean the government and the taxpayers paid more money towards it.
I don't remember a huge university.
Well, that's because you were at university.
You've never paid taxes anyway. You hide all your cash.
And we need workers to do certain jobs that British people are not willing to do. Now, if we can pay the British people enough to do those jobs, great.
They still won't do them. My husband works in a comedy club, and when they had to hire British people in the last 2 years, they're resentful and they make fun of Edson's accent. So, and they're and they steal. So I like the foreigners. No, the foreigners are better, right? They appreciate it more. They like being here.
OK, moving on to the Daily Star. What have they got in the front cover, Scott?
Well, apparently, You're a Daft Pair of Witchetty Grubs is all about the naturalist Chris Peckham accusing NDEC of ruining their reputations by allowing animal abuse on I'm a Celeb. They've been eating bugs, eating spiders, I think. Yeah. And spiders are friends. I love spiders.
So they actually eat spiders?
I think they roll around in the green things and eat spiders. I think they do, yeah.
Because I feel like, you know, if we're talking about animals, I'm not too fussed about people or creatures. I'm not too fussed about people eating bugs or cockroaches.
Are
bugs
technically animals?
I think they are animals.
Well, they're saying animal abuse here, but I think this Chris person meant creature, like, you know, inhabitants abuse of things who live there. Right. Like, we're just visitors with this show, and we should respect the creatures who actually call that home. And instead, they're feeding them to the celebrities. But it's weird to me that they pick on the celebrities in a way, because they're starving, aren't they? They're really, really hungry, so they're eating less probably than they usually do. They're probably abusing creatures less than they do when they're in the UK.
That's a great point. And also, because they're eating things like kangaroo testicles, that means, you know, the rest of the kangaroo, the nice cuts, the nice steaks, can be eaten. So we're actually making better use of the kangaroo, so fewer kangaroos have to die.
Oh, you've really thought this through.
Yeah.
You've been Googling kangaroo testicles.
Well, but if you live with somebody who eats all the creature, like my husband does, because he's Brazilian, or my grandfather used to eat the pig's feet and the ears and the eyes and everything, you really respect that, people that eat all that stuff. But maybe this person's angry, this Chris Peckham person is angry, because they don't seem to give credit to the local environment and how important it is to keep it thriving and all that stuff.
Is this the sort of guy who, like, when he's walking down the street, he's sweeping all the bugs out of his way with a little brush?
He doesn't like noise. He's that type of person.
He doesn't like anything by the sounds of
noise.
it. Yeah. Anyway, you can eat a cucumber.
He doesn't like fun. I love that show. It's one of my favorites. I love watching celebrities suffer. I think it's great.
It's a great show.
It's so much fun to watch.
Especially right now with Nigel in there.
Oh, it's hilarious. They're trying to catch him and they haven't caught him yet. He's just a guy who makes jokes.
OK, well, what's on the front of Wednesday's Telegraph, Josh?
Patients at risk from virtual GP sessions.
Oh, God.
It seems like up to a third of GP appointments are going now on Zoom. And because of that, people are falling through the gap. It's got some pretty horrific stories, actually. A 16-year-old girl diagnosed with glandular fever. She died of sepsis afterwards. Jeez. Yeah, I know. A pregnant mother, they thought she had urinary problems, but she had a premature rupture. So there is a payoff to what they're doing. I guess it's a cost-cutting measure. Yeah. They're able to see more patients in a
But they're seeing them on a blurry webcam instead of in real life.
Exactly. So they're trying to implement some measures that are going to sort, and there's like some oversight, and obviously the less experienced doctors won't know what to see as much. So, yeah, this is just another way that we're not getting the service that we deserve.
I mean, to be fair, before they introduced virtual GP sessions, we weren't getting the service we deserved, Scott.
No, I was misdiagnosed with the flu and told to go home, and I almost died with pneumonia at home. But, yeah, my GP misdiagnosed me. And,
in the flesh?
Yes. In the flesh. And she said, just go home and rest. And Edson was saying, your temperature's really, really high, and anyway. So, yeah, we weren't getting the service we deserve already. So, yeah, I see them. I understand they're trying to do cost-cutting measures, but it seems like what they're doing is they're putting the patients at risk, and that's really bad.
Yeah. And finally, we've got that royal racist story in the Mirror, Scott.
Oh, right. A book has named a senior royal as the person at the centre of the Harry and Meghan racism row. And in the book Endgame by Omid Scobie, he details how the royal had remarked about the skin color, we've all heard about this, of Archie the baby. And he names the person in the book, but the media doesn't. Yeah. But the Daily Mirror puts X's in where the name is.
Well, one of you must have Googled it. Who is it?
I've got it here. It's 4 X's.
I didn't, I thought about Googling it, but I didn't think it would come up because they hadn't listed it in the Daily Mirror.
I love how the Mirror is being all sort of honourable about it.
Yeah.
We have decided at the Mirror. We are not going to tell you.
After they put that story about Archie's skin colour on the paper for
I've got to query whether this is actually racist. I mean, if you've got, I've got friends, mixed race families. I'm from a mixed race family myself. If you're gonna discuss, what colour eyes, what colour hair, what colour skin. It's not a racist thing. It'd be racist if they then said, and that's bad. Yeah. But if they're just discussing it, as
well, they could have just left it really, and not really.
We could just leave everything and not talk about anything.
But I mean, but I think, but this person discussing it might have been doing it for a point or wanted some sort of.
Yeah, or maybe some people are just a bit touchy and want to get offended about everything. Not saying Harry and Meghan in particular.
I like that it's been revealed by a person called Scooby.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. Turned up at the magical mystery bus. Anyway, that's the front page is done with, but stay with us. Coming right up, we've got another COVID conspiracy theory coming through.
God.
Olivia Colman in a latex suit and a plane powered by chip fat. See you in a couple of minutes.
Who is it?
We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Leo Carson. I'm still here with Josh Howie and Scott Capurro, kicking things off here with a Telegraph, and another conspiracy theory becomes reality as Michael Gove tells the COVID inquiry that the virus is likely man-made. Josh.
COVID could be man-made, Michael Gove tells inquiry. Yeah, how far we've come. What a change this has been. But the interesting thing is that he's the angle he seems to be pushing is like, no, it was probably man-made, so we weren't prepared for a man-made virus. Yeah. So really, it's just him trying to absolve himself of any responsibility, and that was messed up. But the thing was that wasn't what went wrong, arguably, like in terms of us being able to deal with it medically. It was as much the response that they sort of ignored the evidence or to fit their narrative that they were pushing forward at the time in terms of things like you have to be this far apart, or you have to wear a mask, or or the lack of schooling, or whatever it was. So it was the ignoring of the evidence that, for me, is the stuff that's come out of this COVID inquiry that is the most troubling stuff. Whether or not it had been a man-made virus or not, that wouldn't have changed in terms of how they responded to it.
But for me, I mean, Scott, for me, this is mind-blowing. We've seen conspiracy theory after conspiracy theory become conspiracy fact. The lab leak theory is now seen as completely plausible. Vaccine damage has been proven, and this is another one. Another one's toppling.
I think they know that it's man-made, and they're putting it out there to see how people react. Like, just say it and see what they do. And then in a month, we'll say, oh, look, like they did with it. I mean, some people were kind of saying it was lab created initially, and then, like you said, people said it was conspiracy theory, and then eventually it became fact. I think this is kind of going to become fact at some point. Yeah. And what I like about this, he spends a lot of time kind of sort of apologizing to people who died. I'm really sorry if you died. It's bad. It's really bad. Kind of. And then he said, but you know, we're human beings. I mean, the ones who lived. So we messed up, but human beings do. So I think that's what he's saying is mistakes were made, and there's going to be more information, I think, revealed. Not just this, but we're going to hear more in the future of what actually happened. And I think, like you said, in a few years' time, the story will completely flip. What actually happened will be almost different from what we think now happened.
Yeah,
So-
and it seems pretty obvious that having governments in charge of things, we should have just had the freedom to handle our own safety instead of having a government deciding what was safe for us. That always
There was so much fear and hysteria, though. But
I don't know if I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, it's what I'm saying is right. I'm not saying you're going to agree with it. Lots of stuff. We've got the Independent now with ructions over Greece demanding that Britain returns the Elgin marbles. Can't Greece just wait until the British Museum stick them on eBay for 20 quid, Scott?
Apparently not. They want their Parthenian scriptures, Parthenon, whatever they're called, scriptures, because they're such a hot ticket. Everybody wants to see him, but I think the people that want to see him have seen him now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Time.
It's like Liza. We've seen it on film. We've got it. So I think Greece just wants them back because Greece says they're ours. And a meeting was set up with, I'm going to try this, the Prime Minister of Greece, Kyriakos Mitsotakis.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. And he was snubbed by the Prime Minister here in the UK because he didn't want to meet with him because he knew that the meeting was going to turn into we want our marbles back. They were supposed to talk about the wars going on and how Greece is contributing and how well Athens is doing now that it's owned by the Chinese. And maybe we can sell Palestine to the Chinese because, I mean, from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free is, I think, I think that's, you're asking for too much. I think 20% off is the most we can hope for Palestine. And you make a deal, the Chinese might buy because they're always looking for cheap deals, right?
Yeah.
If they can make money out of Greece, maybe they can make fun of it. So I think that it turned out that the meeting was going to be about one thing, and then it was about nothing.
So Rishi's pulled the whole meeting. I mean, Josh, it seems unfair for Greece to be bringing it up. We stole them fair and square back in the old days when that sort of thing was okay.
Yeah.
And also, if they're really Greek, why are they called the Elgin marbles? That's a place in Scotland. So shouldn't they be thanking us for keeping them safe?
Yeah.
Well, no. And two things, I think. Number one is by Sunak kind of cancelling this meeting, it's handed a bit of an opportunity to Keir Starmer to step in. There's photos of him meeting the Greek Prime Minister instead, gives him the role of the Prime Minister in waiting.
And of course, Labour hate the UK, so they're going to hand everything back.
Well, they just want to borrow them. Greece just wants to borrow them for a little while. They said, look, we'll give them back. We just want to take a look at them, make sure they're looked after well. Like, you know, and we'll check both sides, front and back, and then we'll send them right back, and we all know that's all right.
Lying. I think we'll get those boxes back, and they'll just be full of breeze blocks.
I think they'll borrow them for like 1,000 years.
Yeah.
And we
like
will
that.
actually get them back.
They'll eat off them. You know, they'll make a mess. So it's better that we have
Supposedly
them.
the majority of the country think that it's fine to give them back.
Yeah, I'm not bothered. I've seen them. They're not that great. The Telegraph now, and just as the ESG mafia shakedown pyramid scheme starts to collapse, New Labour want businesses to sign up to it, Josh.
Well, that's a slight misnomer there. Force all businesses to embrace the ESG urges New Labour think tank. So this was a think tank that was big under old New Labour. Now we've got new Labour Light or whatever, I don't know. And but you are right in that this whole business model is collapsing. Capitalism is about making money for the shareholders in terms of large companies and whatnot. We have seen these companies beholden to this ESG, and ESG means environmental, social and governance movement, things like Bud Light going and losing huge amount parts of its shares, pricing because of using, what was his name again? His name?
Dylan Mulvaney.
Dylan Mulvaney.
Her name, you bigot.
Yeah, sorry. And this is a slightly ridiculous strategy when it's been disproved, when we've seen companies where it backfire, and we've also seen huge companies like Unilever essentially reject this idea because it has cost them so much money.
Well, yeah, I mean, Scott, this idea of assigning morality to capitalism, it just doesn't, it's not workable in practice. I mean, the ESG score for tobacco companies can be really high because they have, you know, diversity schemes and all the rest of it, all the sort of layers of bureaucracy that gunk up a business and stop it being competitive. Whereas Tesla, which is making the green machines that are going to save the planet, has a terrible ESG score. It makes no sense. And also arms dealers, arms manufacturers used to have terrible ESG scores. Now we need them for Ukraine to defend itself, so now they're morally good. It just seems ridiculous to assign morality to capitalism.
Yeah, I don't own a gun or drive a car or do any of those things because I believe in Earth, in Mother Earth, and also because I'm poor. These things don't, none of this stuff, I mean, I buy whatever I can get my hands on because I'm basically, I'm a live performer, so I'm by nature working class. But I think that these issues and these worries are for people oddly, who live in a higher echelon and have time to worry about this stuff. whilst they're flying private jets around the planet.
And they've got other people's money to play with.
Yeah, they do.
That's what it's being done with. It's being done with pension funds and all the rest of it, which is, and some of the pension funds, some of the pensioners are now suing because they're saying, why did you invest my money
in oil?
To make money instead of, I don't, that's more important to me. I'd rather go on a cruise than have somebody.
I mean, I think we can agree that ESG belongs in Chinese food, and that's it.
Very good. We've got the Times now, and Olivia Colman has been filmed dressed in latex to stop people investing in oil. And if they keep doing it, she'll release more pictures, Scott.
Yeah, well, she's stars in a climate change advert attacking pension funds. The award-winning actress plays a latex-clad oil executive who celebrates the fact that we're just talking about the 88 billion.
Hey now.
All right. There she is.
She's got out with a friend of mine, actually.
Yeah,
we can talk over it.
She's 88 billion of UK pension savers' money goes to fossil fuel companies. So in this clip, it lasts longer than a minute. She plays Olivia Colman, thanking pensioners. See what they've done there for their generosity in achieving record profits. Oil companies, and then she obviously black is meant to be oil, but also evil. And then at one point she pours oil all over her. Yeah, she's 49 years old. She's done pretty well. She won an Oscar, and she wants to save the world, but also private jets. So it's hard for her, right?
This campaign is being led by Richard Curtis.
I know.
I'm pretty sure Richard Curtis has got a higher footprint than me.
She has 3 Rolls Royces and stuff, but she's really worried about fig trees. So she's gonna promote non-drinking of oil or some. Yeah, there we go. And that photo of her looks familiar. So yes, she's a good girl. She's a nice person, and she's funny and stuff. She's funny in Peep Show. I like her in that.
Yeah,
I mean, she's
great
doing the movies and stuff. I mean, I wonder, like. I was at a show last week, and these 2 girls cried and screamed because I told a couple of jokes about what's going on with Hamas, and they screamed and cried really, really loud and followed me out of the club, and they said, "You're promoting genocide," and then they screamed to the club owner, and he said, no, he defended me, and then they said, "You're a C word," and then one of the women who works at the club, who's Muslim, said, "Why don't you guys invest and give money to save, Palestine?" And they said, we're going to go across the way and buy more wine. So, people don't really want to give.
Yeah.
Not really.
I mean, look, it goes back to what you said before, isn't it? There's hypocrisy here from the people pushing this stuff. But if you don't want people to invest in these funds, their pensions, make them not pay so well.
Yeah.
So that's how it happens. The pension funds have a duty to make money for pensioners, ultimately. If that money is unfortunately coming from hydrocarbons...
which we all use. Olivia Colman and Richard Curtis.
Well, this is it. So let's put some money into other things which will then make this money not so...
Maybe she drives an electric car and eats raw food.
Maybe. Anyway, we've got the Metro now with a story about cooking oil used for flying.
Speaking of which...
Although, as a Scotsman, I'd prefer to see it used for frying, Josh.
It's been a few years I've been in Scotland. I haven't had my usual deep-fried Mars bar.
Yeah.
Yum, yum.
It's actually a delicious way to eat a Mars bar. I went on a diet once and I steamed my Mars bars, and it's disgusting.
Crispin Fly, first transatlantic flight powered by cooking oil, takes off from Heathrow. This is a Virgin Atlantic Boeing S787 for any geeky people out there. The government paid them about £1 million last year to do this flight, to show that it's feasible. And they're also, because the idea is if we start investing in this, it could bring in like £2.5 billion a year, 5,000 UK
How many chip shops we got here?
Well, this is it. So whether that's actually going to happen, but it's, as a proof of concept, it's great. I think people would like to maybe feel like when they go flying, that they're not killing the planet.
I had a friend tell me he won't go on a trip because he's worried about the planet.
Really?
He's a tree hugger. He told me that yesterday at lunch. I started laughing. I thought he was kidding, but then I was really impressed with him. I'm like, well, that's putting up. Really is.
My mate's Fonco had an old Mercedes that could actually, you could put old chip fan. You had to filter it, but old chip fat from chip shops and stuff in the car, and it would run, and you got this delightful fragrance of sort of fish and ships.
They don't have to remodel the engines or do anything to the planes. They just fill it with about half oil and half regular fuel, and then it flies.
70% less than it would normally use in terms of pollution. And also, but the problem is you have to eat a lot of McDonald's to go to Mallorca.
Yeah.
Right.
So the plane kind of sinks with all the people on board eating all the fried food.
Right.
Yeah. And then people are fatter, and then in which case you have to use more fuel to
It's harder to get them up into the sky. Anyway, we're at the halfway point. Stay with us for Owen Jones sharing neo-Nazi propaganda.
More?
Chris Packham standing up for Bush Tucker, and how playing football hurts your brain. See you in a couple of minutes.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new t-shirt.
It's your new t-shirt. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it?
We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie, second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners. We've got the Express now, and after making a career of calling people Nazis, Owen Jones is minimising the biggest atrocity against Jews since the Holocaust. They're always the thing they accuse you of, aren't they, Scott?
Why am I getting the Owen Jones story? Why do I get that? Because the gay thing, maybe?
Well, they didn't want to give it to the Jew. So I was going to go for it.
I do think he's cute, but I watched his video explanation of what he actually said. But Owen Jones told to, quote, seek help, or, quote, over deeply morally repugnant and wrong, end quote, Hamas claims. Apparently, Jones watched the footage that a lot of journalists were called in to watch about the October 7th brutal attacks on Israelis. And it was about a 45-minute selection of footage that was put together to show these journalists. And his comment afterwards, I think, having watched his response on video before we did the show, I think his response has been misinterpreted. Because what he actually said was, in this video, maybe he didn't say this originally, but in the video explanation, the apology, he said, look, what I was asking for, well, I think that all the footage, all of it, should have been handed over to journalists so it could be examined, so that day could be put together together, piece by piece, minute by minute. He said, which is totally reasonable request, which anyone would make that request.
He's probably going to be a bit less anti-Semitic in the apology.
He has gone on and on and on to make a point that he has I don't know that he's defended Palestinians, but he has seemingly taken a side in the discussion. And it seems like he took that side from minute one, like he was ready to pounce on Israel and Israelis.
And now Josh is ready to pounce on him.
No, I just, look, Rachel Riley, Jewish TV presenter, mathematician, she basically said it best in terms of, like, he's the kind of guy who'd watch watch a documentary about the Holocaust and go, wait a minute, did people really get gassed because I didn't see any footage of the gas, like, inside the gas chambers as they happened? Which is essentially what he said in that original video.
He said he saw footage of boys running with the father being killed.
But he's like what he did was like call into doubt that, you know, stuff that outside of that footage that hasn't been filmed, but is evidence. There's first-hand evidence.
He wants to examine it himself as a journalist.
Yeah, because there is Jews saying it. Yeah, that's the issue. There's eyewitness testimony of the most horrific kind of people, of the first responders turning up on the scene who are absolutely traumatized by it, and physical evidence as well. But for him, it's not good enough that he doesn't actually see it. He can't just take the well-documented evidence as fact because it's coming from a Jewish source, from an Israeli source. It must thus be.
Or maybe he's saying that have a second perspective. Other than the perspective we've had already, to have some people standing away a bit and examining what happened would, in a way, make it more, to people who may not think that what happened, it would make it completely credible. And that argument would go away.
Okay, but here's the thing. You have Hamas filmed it on the day.
Yes.
Right? Put that stuff out there. Put this insane stuff out there.
Yeah.
And
so it's already in the public domain.
But the idea is that somehow that's going to convince them. Like, these people are nutters. Yeah. They are insane, and they will do anything to vilify Israel and Jews, basically.
Yeah, I mean, are you surprised? Because the ADL have put forward neo-Nazi groups that are saying the exact same thing as Owen Jones. Yeah. And are you surprised to see people on the left who are supposed to be so full of kindness and tolerance and all the rest of it suddenly basically aligned with hardcore neo-Nazis?
Well, it's not suddenly. These are people I've been fighting now for coming up to 7 or 8 years. They are scum, they are evil, they're horseshoe theory, they have met around on the other side, the far left, the far right. They lie, they obfuscate on any issue. It's insane. And, you know, people out there were celebrating and protesting against Israel before Israel even responded. On October 7th, people are protesting October 8th and out there celebrating what happened to Israelis and whatnot. So someone like Owen comes along and, of course, you know, on one hand is like, but believe all women, unless they're Jewish women. Yeah. Suddenly they must be liars.
I had a comedian tell me like a week after October 7th at a gig at the Comedy Museum, he said, yeah, a friend of mine told me that the Jews deserved it. He told me right before I went on. He said, I didn't say that, but he said, and by the way, do you want to play a gig I have? That's what he said to me. I said, I want you to leave the room. I want you to leave the club.
That's insane.
Why would you repeat that sort of garbage? Why would you?
Well, this is because it ties down into their hate, their anti-Semitism that is buried very deep there.
Yeah, or not.
Owens isn't buried so deep.
We've got the Sun now, and staying with the anti-Semitism theme, the BBC is in trouble for its topical comedy show, which should be called "Have I Got Angry Jews for You?"
BBC slammed for making Guz Khan host of Have I Got News for You after comedian accused Israel of genocide. Now, Guz is someone who I have argued with online on Twitter about these very things. He's basically spent 7 weeks pushing forward essentially what I believe to be Hamas propaganda, the usual stuff about genocide, even though there's no genocide taking place, even though the Palestinian population have doubled in 20 years, terms like occupation, even though Israel left Gaza in 2005, and also just even as Jews are being murdered, even as babies were being murdered and children raped. I don't even want to say the stuff that is out there. He was out there retweeting essentially a mixture of whataboutery and victim blaming and whatnot. So the fact that the BBC, who are making themselves all about being impartial, are pushing someone like him to the front of one of their prime time shows, just for me, that's just another slap in the face for Jews. This is a week after the BBC said that BBC Jewish employees, or Jewish or not, are not allowed to go out and march against anti-Semitism, against racism. And, of course, on the back of the fact that the BBC has just absolutely the BBC News has been despicable over the last month and a half in terms of the way that it's presented news that have led to real-life repercussions for Jewish people around the world. And someone like Guz, who has pushed this stuff, and looking through his tweets, he's still got these tweets up about how Israel bombed the hospital and whatever, and then it turns out it wasn't hospital, and then it wasn't Israel, and then it wasn't a hospital, it was a car park, and it wasn't 500 dead, it was 100 dead. Well, you know, that night, people went out around the world and rioted, and synagogues were burnt down, and Guz has still got those kind of tweets up there. Yeah. So I think it's disgusting.
You're not going on tour with them.
I wonder how his act. I'm just thinking, I wonder how his act would do in Gaza. I mean, I think he seems to have some sort of brotherhood thing with these people that he seems to be defending, but really, I think his brotherhood is here in this country for a reason.
Well, it should.
And his act works in this country.
Wouldn't it be great if more people thought like that and, you know, felt the number one affinity with Britain?
I'm just speaking about that brotherhood. I believe he's from a Pakistani family, right? What has that necessarily got to do with him, that part of the world, a very complicated part of the world? A handful of tweets I've noticed from him over the years with Syria, Yemen, Sudan, the Uyghurs, like a handful. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of Muslims who have been killed in those instances. Yeah. But here, he's on it all the time. And by the way, 1.7 million, they talk about ethnic cleansing, 1.7 million Afghans have been kicked out of Pakistan right now.
Recently.
Right now. Yeah. Is he tweeting about that? No.
No, because it's not being done by Jews. Anyway, The Independent now, and teachers on strike will still have to fulfil their roles at a very basic level. Will anyone notice the difference, Josh?
Teachers must... Sorry, I'm just coming down on my Guz high.
Take a breath. Take a breath. Woo! Really enjoying this.
Teachers must meet minimum service levels in schools to protect children from strike action, the government says. Yeah, so we have two competing rights here. We have the right of people to withhold their work, their labour, and we have the right of our... and we have the right of children to gain an education. And what we've seen over this with the strikes in the last year, there are 25 million school days lost. The amount of the brain drain on our future population because of that, it's been proven how just losing 1 or 2 days for a child makes a big impact through their life.
And this comes right after the COVID years when teachers were very quick to say, oh no, we've all got to stay at home, because then they didn't have to do any work. They could start drinking at noon instead of waiting until 3 p.m.
Oh, they do anyway. You know they do. Well, you know.
Look, we want them to be paid more.
Let's squeeze in one more story before the break. We've got the Times now with a correlation between football and a decline in brain function.
Well, just like missing a day in school means your brain shrinks. Also, in football, if you're heading the football, if you're hitting, doing that thing, that more heading means that your brain is being damaged. And they did 2 different studies. And one study where they took these people for 2 years, not in professional football, but in amateur, and they about 75% male, 25% female, and
identify as female.
Right. I'm sorry. Pronouns and lesbians, and they banged their heads against a ball, and they found that it did diminish their brain capacity over a 2-year period. So
who'd have thought like having a large, heavy ball hit your head would be bad for it?
Well, this explains all the interviews after football matches
where they kind of stare at the camera. I mean, they did say that not just cognitive, but the speech patterns seem to be diminishing. But then football players, I mean, you know, verbal speech is not their first form of communication, let's face it. So it may just be that they're a bit thick. And maybe their crowns should be thicker to protect them from hitting the ball against the head thing, but they will do it anyway because they love it. That's a beautiful image when they do it, isn't it? When the ball and the thing, it's beautiful.
It's like saying my head looks like a ball.
Well, one more section to go. We'll bring you squirrel replacement theory and a school chaplain investigated by terror police for questioning gender ideology. We'll be right back.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the final part of Headliners. We've got the Mail now with the latest woke reimagining of history. Scientists think women were better at hunting than men. Oh yeah, and I bet men were better at picking cushions for the cave. Josh.
We got through there.
Picking cushions.
Debunking the myth of the male hunter. Prehistoric women were better at hunting than men, study claims. Well, that isn't what the study claims at all. It doesn't say that they were better than men. If anything, it says they were maybe as good. And even then, it's not fully clear. They're saying that like, the female body, because of estrogen, could endure longer runs and the hip and stuff like that. But that doesn't prove that they're actually better at catching.
Well, they say that about older marathon runners. The ones that do best are older females, and because their minds are more settled and more calm. They also say in this article that there weren't enough people in the tribe for people to have specific skills. I mean, everybody did everything, right?
Yeah. So this is prehistoric times, but also because they found female bodies that had same what they call hunting damage or whatever than the male one.
Broken ankles.
All that means is that it wasn't necessarily something that they could have got from hunting. It might have just been that was what life was like back then.
Or a fetish. Could have been a fetish.
Yeah, it could have just been really bad at picking berries. Falling over and falling on a saber-toothed tiger.
But the idea that this proves, and this person here tries to say at the end, in a broader sense, you can, when you look at a person's sex or gender, that you assume someone's abilities. Yeah. It's like, no, if I see a man who's 6'2" and I see a woman who's 5'4", I'll go, yeah, the man's stronger. Like, there are different types. There's a value system on physical, what she calls physical inferiority, and men and women are good and bad at different physical things.
But you got to watch Naiad. You got to watch that film Naiad about that swimmer, the woman who swam from Cuba to Florida. She swims for 3 days in the sea without touching anything.
Why didn't she get a boat or?
Because it was a challenge. You have to
okay.
Right, amazing. Well, we've got the Mirror now, and scientists are concerned that aggressive invaders are replacing Britain's native population and costing the state lots of money. Relax, everyone. We're talking about squirrels. Scott.
Your poor wife, Josh, your poor wife. Grey squirrels, the Hamas of the squirrel world, as an MP calls them. This Westminster MP, Jim Shannon, used a hall debate to compare the invasive creatures to Palestinian terrorists who slaughtered 1,200 Israelis last month, as we all know. Grey squirrels are the Hamas of the squirrel world. I mean, they run at my building, and they run past my bedroom window. I do hate them. I would like to murder them, actually. They're
I think
horrible.
they're cute. I mean, they're cute. And I know
they're rats with fuzzy tails.
They're an invasive. People say that, but they're not like rats. Rats live in the sewer. Squirrels live in probably trees.
In sewers.
I grew up where you get red squirrels, which are very, very, very cute, and they're red. That's why they're called red squirrels.
We're not talking about
But they're smaller, and these grey squirrels have come in, and basically they're pushing the native red squirrel population out of.
That was the point he was trying to make.
Yeah.
That they're ethnic cleansing the red squirrels.
Yeah.
I think the analogy he used might have been inappropriate.
Well, unfortunately, red squirrels aren't backed by the American military-industrial complex,
right?
So they can't retaliate against the grey squirrels.
Are you saying that because you want me to make a call?
Well,
is that what this is about?
Well, they want
an intervention.
They're talking about giving them the pill, which as opposed to killing them, but they could just dye them red.
Then we won't know. No, they're bigger. People will know. Anyway, we've got the Mail now, and we have 40,000 Islamists on terror watch lists, but somehow counter-terror police still have time to target school chaplains for questioning LGBTQ ideology, Josh.
Yeah, this is mental. Chaplain at 40,000 a year Trent College was reported to counter-terror police after telling pupils they should question LGBT ideology in the same way they did Brexit. So what we're talking about here, and as he says by his speech, that he's trying to have a reasoned debate about beliefs, and it's okay to try and persuade each other, but no one must be told they should accept an ideology. Yeah. And he then says, like believing in whether Brexit should happen or not, you're not going to get me Brexit, or should be forced to be a Muslim. There's nothing wrong with this speech. The idea that he is fired, and the idea that he was actually then, recommended to prevent is insane.
Where does the terror aspect come in? I can't even.
I know
piece it together in my head.
It seems like the school recommended him. It seems like they brought in one of those outside companies to do the sex education, and
Stonewall or something.
Yeah, well, but probably pushing the gingerbread man and all of this ridiculous gender identity.
I had a couple of guys complain when I handcuffed them.
Fair enough.
Because I was trying to train them about what it was to be gay, and I think they had to be. I didn't need to make them quiet and calm.
So this is gay conversion, but the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, my husband's only 10% gay, but. Oh, that 10%. But I feel like for this, it seems like a bit of an overreach. It seems like it's a bit of a pimp slap against religion in general from the left.
Yeah.
Saying, we don't want them around at all, so let's get them on this issue, right? Because everybody's sensitive about the LGBT issue. Although, are we? There's so many of us. They said AIDS killed them in the 80s, but there's more now than ever before. God, there's so many gays and rainbows.
I think it's more there's so many letters.
Seriously, every time, and they keep adding letters because gays are so lonely. Every time I go to a village or in town to play a gig, there's a rainbow crosswalk. Why? They ruin the atmosphere every town and village. We were in a hillside community, my husband and I, like a coal miner community with a bunch of working class people doing their jobs, and all the crosswalks for pedestrians were rainbow. Why?
They wanted to make you feel comfortable.
It made us feel pointed at.
Maybe they just had a big Irish community.
I want my anonymity when I handcuff people.
Let's quickly squeeze the last two stories in. We've got the Express with a sign, staying with the idea of state overreach. The state has far too much power, Scott.
Oh, a retired music teacher, Anne Seago, 97, was, with the birds and the wild sparrows and the robins who flock to her seeds and her bird table in her garden. But the council ordered her to stop after a neighbor lodged an official complaint with the local council, and she was told she'd be fined £100 if she continued to feed seeds to the birds. She's 97. And she was community protection notice under the Antisocial Behavior, Crime and Policing Act of 2014. If she continues to feed the birds, they're going to get her on that.
I mean, this is horrific. This is the worst use of antisocial behaviour powers than we've seen this week at the anti-Semitism.
I think the problem is she has dementia. She doesn't remember each day feeding the birds, so she just goes out and does it again. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, she's 97. This is what brings her joy in her life, Josh.
Yeah, it's not like she can just go down to the park.
Yeah. Or the pub.
Well, no, she can't. She literally can't.
Yeah,
probably.
yeah.
I don't know.
She will be seeds in a couple of years. The birds will be pecking her. What are they going to do then?
Then they'll really have to hand that fine out. Finally, we've got the Times with good news for those of us glued to our phones, Josh.
Yeah, gaming and social media don't harm mental health, says Oxford study, which is great news. I read that at 3 in the morning on my phone. And,
the problem is everybody's stupid, or so how they explain that.
Yeah, so exactly. Well, they're trying to say that because they this is a study of 2 million people around the world, and because like early adopting countries like South Korea didn't have an uptick in mental health issues that you would have seen earlier than everybody else, then the internet isn't the problem, or Facebook or whatever.
Right.
They correlated all those things. So something's going on, because mental health is definitely...
I think people have just made up more syndromes. Now everybody's got ADHD. Even perfectly normal people have got ADHD. Part of it's a way to get, medical grade speed from the NHS.
We forget that flaws are attractive. I mean, look at comedians. We're a bunch of losers with nothing better to do, right? But people want to sleep with us.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Sometimes. If we can get it. Anyway, the show is nearly over, so let's take another quick look at Wednesday's front pages. The Daily Mail leads with Scobie book pulled for naming royal racist by mistake. The Telegraph has patients at risk from virtual GP sessions. The Sun has they stole her voice. That's one of the child hostages taken by Hamas who's been returned. The Mirror has book names royal racist, although the Mirror did not. iNews has Jenrick goes rogue with dig at number 10 on migration. And finally, the Daily Star has you're a daft pair of witchetty grubs. And those were your front pages. And that's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests Josh Howie and Scott Capurro. And Simon Evans will be back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Josh and Jonathan Cogan. If you're watching at 5 a.m, do stay tuned for breakfast. Thanks for watching. Abby Lee Kerr. Good night.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GBNews.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet?
What is this?
It's my new
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Welcome to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey again. I'm with you again till 8 o'clock. I'm here in all week, in fact. So you're stuck with me and we've got a great show planned for you. We're going to discuss Andrew Bailey, the Bank of England governor, who is saying that Britain's growth outlook is the worst he's ever seen. Is he a doom monger that's talking down the economy? We're also going to be joined by Nimrod Palmak, who's an Israeli hero who saved hundreds of lives on October the 7th after leaving a goodbye message to his own children. And we head back to the Gold Coast to get the jungle latest from Ben Leo as questions are raised over Nigel's airtime. All of this and much, much more to come after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Camilla, thank you, and good evening to you. We begin this bulletin with some breaking news. We can tell you 12 more Israeli hostages have now, this evening, been released from Gaza. We've had word from Israel Defense Forces, which says 10 Israelis and 2 foreign nationals are now on their way home to their families, of course, after medical checks. The exchange is part of the commitment to a 5th-day pause in fighting, a humanitarian truce, if you will, with the Hamas terror group. We're also hearing that in exchange, 30 Palestinian prisoners will be released tonight as well, taking the form pretty much of what happened last night. And this comes as the United States slightly changed its approach today, asked Israel to take greater care in any future strikes on Gaza, a shift to their approach at the White House, saying civilians and vital infrastructure must be protected. But surely the headline news tonight is that good news, at least for those Israeli families who are waiting for those Israeli hostages to get home. 12 more are on their way back to their families. Now, in news here in the UK, a double murderer who sexually abused more than 100 dead bodies wasn't caught due to serious failings at the hospitals where he worked. An inquiry was found today. David Fuller was employed at the now-closed Kent and Sussex Hospital and the Tunbridge Wells Hospital between 2005 and 2020. The inquiry chairman, Sir Jonathan Michael, said the maintenance worker was able to access the mortuary hundreds of times in just 1 year, going unnoticed and unchecked. And a man has admitted killing 3 people who died in separate attacks in Nottingham earlier this year. Students Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar, both 19, and 65-year-old caretaker Ian Coates died after being stabbed in June. Valdo Calocane, also known as Andam Mendes, denied murder but admitted 3 counts of manslaughter on the basis of his diminished responsibility. Thousands attended vigils for the victims in Nottingham in the wake of those attacks. Schools could be forced to stay open during teachers' strike action under new plans to be introduced by the government. The Education Secretary saying strikes over the last year are some of the most disruptive they've ever been for children. Teaching unions described the plans for minimum service levels as shameful, but Gillian Keegan says it's about achieving a fair balance. And if you're getting stuck into planning Christmas this weekend and tonight, you could get the weather to go with it. The Met Office is predicting snow in parts of the UK as we head into the start of December. A yellow weather warning in place for snow and icy conditions. That'll create hazardous conditions in the northeast of England, Yorkshire and parts of Scotland until late tomorrow morning. And another bit of good news to bring you before I go. All 41 workers who were trapped for 17 days in a collapsed tunnel in India are now safely on the ground. Rescuers pulled the workers one at a time out on stretchers through a pipe just 3 feet wide. The Indian authorities had been supplying the men with oxygen, food and water through a separate channel. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. Now, with news of yet more releases of hostages, I'm going to bring Nimrod Palmach into the conversation now. He's the reserve commander in the Special Forces Unit of the IDF, and he's the CEO of Israel is NGO, which is an organisation that helps to promote Israel around the world. Now, Nimrod, you've got this astonishing story because on October the 7th, you found out what had happened. You defied an order and raced to Gaza. You ran towards danger. You wanted to help people there who had come under attack by Hamas. You recorded a goodbye video to your 7-year-old. What did you say?
Truly, it was a very tough morning. I didn't know. I had to choose. Am I a concerned dad, a concerned civilian in Israel, or during my job as a CEO of an advocacy organization, or am I an officer in the reservist? It was a very awful day, and when I made the decision to rush south, I knew I had only 3 minutes of a break when I waited for a friend, and there I recorded a video. Basically, I said goodbye to my kids, that I will always love them, and I will always be with them, and I know that they will be beautiful kids forever. It was a 20-second, no draft, that's it. I had only a few seconds to say goodbye.
But recording it, presuming that if you went into Gaza at that point, that you probably wouldn't come out alive.
So it's not entering Gaza, it's actually to entering the fights on the communities along the border. Yes. I actually accepted death. I knew I'm about to die either in a few minutes or hours, but I had only a pistol, realizing there's so many terrorists out there in those communities inside and the cities in the south, and knowing that there is no much help. People are trying to get there, but not able, and I faced death. I have to tell you, it was one of the hardest things I had to do, but I made a decision with a full heart, and I knew that my kids one day will be proud of me for what I've done.
Yes, and then what happened that day? So you arrive there, you meet up with your friend, then what happened?
We went on the highway right outside one of the communities. We were attacked by a bunch of, let's say, 30 Hamas terrorists. I grabbed a weapon from a dead soldier, and I've witnessed a lot of death around me. For a moment there, in between shooting the terrorists, I stopped and I looked aside, and I've seen a second Holocaust right there on the highway, even before I entered Kibbutz Be'eri. I've seen so many dead people, dead bodies, women that were brutally attacked. I've seen young children at the back of a car, and I said to myself, you're in the middle of a Holocaust, what they have done to us here. And I engaged fight. For 3 hours, I was fighting there outside the community, preventing this group of terrorists entering Kibbutz Alumim and doing a massacre over there.
How do you even begin to process that? And I ask that in the context of the release of some of these hostages, particularly the children. There's lots of focus here because she's Israeli-Irish on Emily Hand, and she gets reunited with her father, but she looks broken to me. You know, a mother of 3, these kids look completely lost. You're a grown adult and you're trying to process what you saw. Yeah. How are these hostages who have been returned to their families, thank goodness, how are they processing it? Are they getting a lot of help?
Definitely. First of all, they are super surrounded by so many professional people, and they get so much love in Israel, all the hostages that got back. Listen, I think that today you won't find one heart in Israel that is not wounded or bleeding with pain, not even one. And regarding the hostages, you know, I fought inside Kibbutz Be'eri to liberate Be'eri from the atrocities all the way to midnight, even more. And on midnight, when I ran outside, running people under fire, one of them decided to stop. He was crying and emotional and kept stopping, and I kept rushing him out because we are under fire. When we got out, he told me that his father was murdered in the morning. He was trapped in the safe room, and then he said, I can't believe she is in Gaza. I asked him who, and he showed me a picture of a young girl, she's 16 years old, with Hamas terrorists doing a selfie with her phone.
Yes.
And I realized then for the first time we have actually kids and teenagers in Gaza. I didn't know, of course, the number, but these kids has a long way to recover. Hopefully they will. We'll give them any love that we can.
Now, I know you've done a lot of work with younger people. What are your emotions towards some of the Palestinian children caught up in this?
I feel very, very bad for them. In Israel, we have no issue with Palestinians. I mean, we have issue with Hamas. The reason we are there attacking because Hamas did an atrocity not just against Israel. It's a jihad war against Western society. And I chose a side of values like love, empathy, human rights. And Hamas brought this destruction and death upon his community, not just in Israel. And actually, as a soldier, I can say, and as an officer and reservist, we are moving so slow in Gaza because we are saving life, because we don't aim to harm any innocent lives.
I mean, are you concerned, and I appreciate your role as a reservist in the IDF, are you concerned about this issue of proportionality? I note that today the White House has said that they want the IDF to operate with, quotes, far greater precision in southern Gaza as they did in the north. I mean, that has to be the right advice, doesn't it?
Listen, I know that Israel needs to strike Hamas to a point where Hamas does not exist anymore. Exactly to say how will it go and what is the process we need. We are doing everything in our power not to harm civilians to a point where sometimes we even risk our life, and we understand it. But what Hamas is doing, using children, operating from schools, from clinic areas, from hospitals, he knows exactly what he is doing. He is taking children as body shields and uses them. So that's...
Can I ask you a political question? Because perhaps question marks have been raised about Netanyahu. Is he the right man to broker peace in the Middle East? Maybe people in your position might prefer former opposition leader Benny Gantz. I mean, he was in charge, of course, former chief of defence force. Would he be better placed, or is Netanyahu the person for this?
I know that everywhere in Israel now people are dealing with politics and what will happen on the day after. I know one thing, we need to win this war. And I'm giving any support to the government as long as I can. I know that for a fact, after the war will end, there will be a committee to investigate everything and to make decisions. I will let the professionals do their job. But for now, I give full back to my government to win this fight against evil.
What does winning the war look like to you, though? Because I can completely understand the impetus behind wanting to destroy Hamas.
Yeah.
But what happens next for Gaza? Who governs Gaza? What happens to the West Bank? I mean, I appreciate these are massive questions, Nimrod.
This is big questions. Listen, I know it's tough to defeat an idea, maybe even impossible. We want to eliminate Hamas' threat against Israel and against Palestinian people. That means that Hamas won't have the ability anymore to threat, to harm innocent people, both in Gaza, in Palestine, and in Israel. That's what we want to achieve. Secondly, we want to make sure that people can live in safe places in Israel without being threatened. You know, they didn't just kill us over there. They brutally attacked women, sexually assaulted women before and after they killed them. They brutally molested young boys and kids and families, full families. It's not just killing, it was actually Holocaust. And we want to make sure that people will feel in Israel, this is maybe the only place that you'll feel safe.
What role will you play in that as a reservist? Because I was imagine when you came back and you were reunited with your children after filming that final farewell, I mean, that must have been quite a moment. And then you face perhaps going into battle.
Yeah.
And obviously that comes with huge risk.
Yeah. I had a lot of small miracles. I was actually got shot in the chest. I wore a bulletproof vest that I took from a wounded soldier. It saved my life from a very close range. For me, it's a miracle to be here. And you know, when you're facing death in such close contact, you get to think a lot. For me, Israel is the only place. It's the only place that is actually safe for Jewish people. And I will do anything in my power that Israel will remain that country. And when I came back home and met my children, I gave them a huge hug. I felt that I earned. God gave me a blessing that day. And on the very next day, not day, even few hours, I got back to the army. I'm a company leader. I have around 80 soldiers that I command, and straight for almost 2 months of reserves. That's what we do.
That's life now. Nimrod, thank you very much for coming in and telling us your quite astonishing story. And what else can I say but try and stay safe?
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, coming up, we're going to be discussing with former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng, Andrew Bailey's comments about the economy. Are they helpful, or is it just more doomsaying for Britain? Stay tuned for that next.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's on your teeth.
It's on your teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. Let's get on to the British economy now and Andrew Bailey's comments about Britain's growth outlook. According to the Governor of the Bank of England, it's the worst I've seen, he said in an interview with the Chronicle in Newcastle. He said, and I quote, "If you look at what I call the potential growth rates of the economy, there's no doubt it's lower than it has been for much of my working life. It does concern me that the supply side of the economy has slowed. It does concern me a lot," he said, for good measure. When asked about the interest rates, Mr Bailey said they were unlikely to be cut for the foreseeable future, as he warned that the next stage of cutting inflation would be, quotes, hard work. Just to remind you that inflation has fallen from a peak of 11.1% in October 2022 to 4.6% last month. And that's on the back, of course, of a drop in the energy price cap. So is Mr Bailey being too negative? This is the Governor of the Bank of England, who should surely be talking the economy up. It's in the same week, of course, let's not forget, that we had this global summit at Hampton Court Palace, which the Prime Minister spoke at. And there, JP Morgan boss Jamie Dimon said the UK was doing great and added that he would take notes to show the White House. And fellow Wall Street heavyweight Steve Schwarzman, the boss of investment giant Blackstone, hailed the UK's real achievement in halving inflation and steering away from the subsidy-heavy approach of President Biden's administration. So the question I'm asking you is Andrew Bailey being too negative? I'd like to know your thoughts. Do get in touch. You can email me at farage@gbnews.com or tweet #Farage on GB News. Now, let's bring Kwasi Kwarteng into the conversation, the Conservative MP for Speltporn and also, of course, former Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'll ask you the question, Kwasi, that I'm asking the audience tonight. Is Andrew Bailey being far too negative?
Well, I think he is being quite gloomy, but of course, he's speaking very honestly. And I have to say about Andrew that I had dealings with him when I was Energy Minister, Energy Secretary of State, and as Chancellor. And I'm actually someone who is a bit of a fan of Andrew. I think he's a very fair guy, but I think he's gone slightly outside of his lane, commenting on what he thinks is going to happen to the British economy. Because, of course, last year he said we were going to be in recession this year, and we weren't.
Yes.
And I don't think he should be a cheerleader. I mean, you said that he should be talking things up. I don't think the governor's job is to be necessarily a cheerleader, but at the same time, he shouldn't really be, casting gloom on our prospects.
Would you say it's unhelpful, Kwasi?
Yeah, I think it is unhelpful. But on the other hand, he's a very honest guy. He's someone I have a lot of time for. He's got a very difficult job. He's been under a lot of pressure. Obviously, we had our relationship broken last year, as it were. But I think it's having been in a similar sort of role, it is a difficult job. But you're right to say that he shouldn't be talking down the British economy.
I mean, I am intrigued by your support for him because, let's be honest, he wasn't Boris Johnson's first pick for governor. Boris Johnson preferred Gerard Lyons, who indeed had quite close links, I believe, to Liz Truss and indeed you. So
that's right.
Why wasn't Bailey Johnson's pick?
I don't know. I mean, I think it was Rishi Sunak when he was Chancellor that appointed him, and it is the gift of the Chancellor. But that's happened, and we've got to work with the officials that we have. So I take a balanced view. I think he's a capable guy. He's well popular within the bank, but at the same time, he shouldn't really be essentially talking down the British economy. And I think his remarks this week were in that line.
Look, you copped a lot of flack, didn't you, because of the mini budget imploding and the markets didn't like it and reacted badly. Yeah, sure. But do you believe that the Bank of England has taken enough responsibility for what has happened to the British economy? Obviously, you can look back to the days of Mark Carney, who kept on blaming Brexit for everything.
That's right.
Actually, he should have taken responsibility for historically low levels of interest after the global financial crash and also huge amounts of quantitative easing, which didn't help the economy at all in the long run, did it?
So look, I think there's an issue with the bank not having any real political accountability. And it does, as you say, have huge amounts of power. I mean, it's quite right that they should be impartial, if you like. They should be officials that get on with their job. But the problem with all of that is that given the powers they exercise, there's very little sort of democratic oversight, even scrutiny of what they do. And in a way, that's the Chancellor of the Exchequer's job. But it is difficult when the governor's saying, he doesn't think the British economy's prospects are very good. That makes the politician's job that much harder.
I wondered what your reaction was to this pay deal with NHS consultants, around 9%. We've also seen in the autumn statement that the national living wage is going to go up. Won't both of these measures fuel inflation?
Well, I think it's a broader point than that. I mean, I think inflation is probably going to be difficult, as the governor said, to deal with, because you've got, more shocks in the system. I mean, oil prices have gone up partly because of the Hamas attack in Israel that you were talking about, appalling terrorist attack. There's a lot of geopolitical volatility, uncertainty. And I think the governor was right to say that the fight against inflation is difficult. But at the same time, I think that, we should be very focused on what is going well with the British economy. I think the investment summit has gone well. I think clearly, this nonsense that Brexit's been a disaster. I mean, we're growing, as the Chancellor pointed out, faster than Italy, France and Germany. So how you can say that Brexit has been a bad thing when the three biggest economies in Europe are facing recession and doing worse than us seems completely absurd.
I thought I would ask you as well, actually, about some of the debate that's currently taking place about immigration. And obviously, on one side of the argument, there's this argument that if you bring more people in, then there are more people working and therefore the more people paying tax, and it kind of grows the British economy. But on the other hand, of course, we are seeing huge pressure on our public services. I think there was a report out in the week suggesting that we'd have to build 500,000 homes a year just to keep pace with the numbers coming in. You'll be familiar with that 745,000 figure that was released by the Office for National Statistics last week. That was covering legal migration to the end of December 2022. Is immigration good for the economy or not?
I think it's got to be an immigration that works for the UK. And that's why, personally, I've always found a points-based system attractive. You've got to limit the numbers, and also you've got to have some control of the abilities, the quality of the people coming into your country so that you can benefit from that. I think the numbers and the people, that they kind of what they bring to the table, I think it needs to be examined. Clearly, the numbers are way in excess of anything that we've stood for, in a general election on, and we need to have more control over that. And even the Prime Minister himself, Rishi Sunak, everyone in the government seems to be concerned about the scale of that immigration.
Although the government doesn't seem to be a nest of singing birds. We've had some conflict between Robert Jenrick and indeed James Cleverly, Home Secretary and his immigration minister. James Cleverly is saying that this Rwanda plan isn't the be-all and end-all when it comes to cutting illegal immigration. There's also the Prime Minister on one hand talking about handing out student visas, meanwhile concerned that students are bringing in too many dependents. There's also been this row between Suella Braverman and the Prime Minister about whether to put a 40 grand cap on people coming in as skilled workers. Would you advocate a cap, Kwasi?
So look, I think a cap and also some sort of point system does make sense. I know Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman well, and I think their general approach was a good one. And I'm not privy to the disagreements they've had with either James Cleverly or if that be the case with Rishi Sunak. I mean, clearly Suella had been in the department for a year, Priti Patel before that. Robert Jenrick's been there for a while as well and has got experience. And I think his approach was probably a good one.
Kwasi Kwarteng, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. Well, as ever, we're going to have an update on Nigel in the jungle from Bin Leo, who is out on the Gold Coast as we speak. I did set him a challenge yesterday in that I suggested he might want to drink a pint of something indescribable in honour of Mr Farage. Let's see how he got on with that challenge. Stay tuned, that'll be up next.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome back to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. Earlier on the show, I asked you whether you thought the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey was being too negative about the British economy, talking it down. This is what you've got to say. Robert says, Andrew Bailey is another Bank of England boss who is not up to the job. Who could you be referring to? Must be Mark Carney, perhaps, who blamed everything on Brexit and not on his own measures. Another viewer says Andrew Bailey has been installed to talk down the British economy as much as possible. He's clearly out of his depth in the role and starting raising interest rates too late and too slowly. Peter says Andrew Bailey is incompetent. Every job he's had, he's failed in. And Andrew says Andrew Bailey is a Remainer and crashing the British economy so he can make the UK look bad after leaving the EU. I don't know if he wants to crash the British economy. That would probably be a bit harsh, not least because it would reflect badly on him. But you may be pointing to something with a degree of Remain-leaning people in the Bank of England, certainly. Thank you. Keep your views coming in on that. Let's go to the Gold Coast now, because Ben Leo, GB News reporter extraordinaire, has got the latest from Nigel in the jungle. Now, Ben, we did speak about the fact yesterday that I felt as if the esteemed host of this show was being rather edited out of some of the footage. I mean, we barely saw him on last night's episode. There's this incident where we believe he told a really great anecdote about Donald Trump, as is his wont, because obviously they know each other quite well. One would expect that to be played because actually there probably aren't better stories than talking about one's relationship with a former US president, particularly when it's Trump, and yet none of it's seen the light of day. What do we think's going on, Ben?
Yeah, that's right. So like you and everyone else at home, I watched last night's episode and was dismayed at the fact he had about 40 seconds, Nigel, had about 40 seconds airtime. He woke up in the jungle and said how beautiful it was, and that was it for the rest of the show. That made me really push forward with something that I discovered a couple of days ago. I have good sources from inside the I'm a Celeb camp who told me that Nigel had quite an interesting conversation about his good friend Donald Trump, about how he helped him on the election trail, how he was a great guy and he was a good friend, and all the campmates were very interested in it. ITV never played that conversation, they never broadcast it, and after seeing that episode last night where Nigel was pretty much airbrushed out the entire episode, I really sort of pushed ahead with it and went to ITV and said, guys, what is going on here? You've not played this interesting conversation about Trump that the campmates were quite keen to listen to. And you would have thought, Trump being one of the most controversial, divisive, popular people in the world, they could have spared 20 or 30 seconds to include that in an episode of the show. They didn't, and all it's done is fuel these rumours and these growing concerns that ITV are deliberately censoring Farage now and starving him of airtime because they want him out the jungle. The theories are that they put Nigel in there to kind of discredit him and get him to make a fool of himself. He's had a few arguments about Brexit, about immigration, which arguably I think he's come out looking better for. He's shown that you can discuss these issues without being toxic or tribal, and you can have a good, honest debate. And I honestly believe now that ITV thought they were going to dunk on Nigel and make him look stupid and really discredit him in the eyes of the public. It hasn't worked, and now we're learning and understanding that he's being censored for airtime because, assumably, reportedly, they want him out of the jungle. So it is worrying. And also, I'll just add as well, I went to ITV with the revelations that I found about the Trump conversation, which no one else had. It was something I got exclusively. They ignored me and never got back to me. And only when I broke the story on Patrick did they then give comments to The Sun and The Mail and The Mirror, and they've still not spoken to me. I knew the story was true. I didn't need their response. I didn't need their confirmation. But just out of courtesy, ITV could have got back to me, and they didn't. So there seems to be an agenda at play against GB News and against Nigel, and it's quite concerning.
It is concerning. The only kind of counter-narrative I can think of, though, is it would be strange for them to want to dump him out of the jungle when they've reportedly paid him so much money to be in there. And, I mean, I did notice the story on the Mail Online sort of suggesting that there were ideological forces that might be opposed to his stance on Brexit and other policy areas that are kind of influencing the production process. And there are people there that just don't like him and don't want him to get their airtime. Maybe after he also said he wanted to do the trials because he would be on television more. I don't know if there's anything in that, Ben.
Well, that story on the Mail Online and also on The Sun, that was a follow of our GB News exclusive. That was my story. They've elaborated on it slightly with some insider quotes from the show saying that they fear there's dirty tricks at play. But as you said, there's a theory that the show is full of lefty producers, and yes, they did pay him a rumoured £1.5 million to get him on. But as I mentioned, this growing theory is that they got him on the show to discredit him, to really smash his reputation during a time where it's highly thought that Nigel is at some point going to get back into politics. If and when the Tories are wiped out at the next election by Labour, Nigel is rumoured to be cozying back up with the Tories. He was, of course, at the Tory conference for the first time in decades in October. And also he's got links to reform as well. So he is, at some point, I think, going to get back into politics. He's made no secret of the fact that he's using I'm a Celebrity to touch base with these 10 million viewers who he thinks wouldn't have given him a chance before. So I think, and I'm going to just put this out there now, that they got him on the show to discredit him, to tarnish his reputation, to make sure that he doesn't have a future in politics. It hasn't worked because he's come out as a genuinely nice person. He's not a racist, he's not a xenophobe, and now the tactic is to starve him of airtime, which colludes with the fact that I found out they are censoring very decent and interesting conversations about Donald Trump. Why would you omit that?
Curious, Ben. Now, tell me, I set you a challenge yesterday. I wanted you to do a drinking or an eating challenge, or both. How did you get on?
OK, well, let me explain to you what's happened. With that story, it's been a very busy 24 hours. I did get in contact with a lot of places, bug farms, where they produce crickets and cockroaches and whatever else. They said, we're not going to help you because it trivialises eating bugs. We think bugs are the future. We want you to stop eating meat. Bugs are a serious conception. This is the future of humanity. So I went to, if you excuse me 1 second, let me grab this box. I went to a local pet shop.
Oh, God.
And got hold of some crickets, which normally are for pet reptiles and lizards and whatever else. I was going to eat one of these this morning on air. However, Camilla, I teased the fact I was doing this on breakfast this morning, and a couple of viewers, quite rightly, have said you shouldn't be eating live crickets or live animals on air. You need to make sure they're dead, and these are live. So, in the interests of not getting Ofcommed and of animal safety and well-being, I'm not going to eat these. But what I will do is I'll set these bad boys free back into the world, so they have a full and enjoying great life, basically. That's what I wanted to say. So I'm not going to eat these. I will, however, Camilla, try and find something else for you in the coming days.
All right, Ben. I mean, it sounds like you're making quite a few excuses there, buddy. It wasn't a difficult challenge. We see Nigel down pints of indescribable things, but then I do get the sort of animal cruelty argument, and I wouldn't want us to be harming bugs or animals on air. So fair enough, but you have to still fulfil this challenge by the time I finish presenting this show this week, which is Thursday night. So off you go, back to the sunshine. Keep on working hard, and we shall see you tomorrow night, Ben. Thank you.
See you soon. Thanks, Camilla.
See you soon. Well, there you have it. Is he going to find something to eat? Who knows? I mean, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but, you know, he's out there having a great time in Australia, so let's at least put him to the test. Now, let's have our can you believe it moment. I know it's meant to be called What the Farage, but I'm adopting it as my own because I'm here this week. So can you believe it? I couldn't believe this story, which we covered in The Telegraph. Pub landlord Glenn Sutherland has resorted to shuttling thirsty punters to his pub's doorstep after a bus strike left his bar almost completely empty. So this is this guy who, let's be honest, has had an absolute nightmare during COVID. The pubs are closed, his takings are down, it's costing him thousands and thousands of pounds. He then is struck by industrial action by Go North East. 1,300 workers have gone on strike since the end of October. That means that nobody can get to his pub. So this landlord, Glenn, who I think we should give some sort of award to, frankly, camera if you're watching, reward this man. He's at the Market Tavern in Chester Street in County Durham. He's been offering his punters a lift to the pub. Some of them live 5 miles away, some of them are elderly, a lot of them are lonely, and coming to the pub breaks up what is a difficult week with being convivial with others and socialising and just enjoying a pint. So good old Glenn Sutherland, we give him a round of applause from the Farage show and say this to these striking workers: what are you doing? You know, we've got a loneliness epidemic going on at the moment. There's that wonderful advert that's gone viral in Ireland talking about that guy who's been widowed and he goes to the pub and a couple come and befriend him and his dog and they have a pint together. That's what it's all about. I mean, pubs are facing a hard enough time as it is without these striking workers. So that's my can you believe it story. If you're anywhere near the Market Tavern in County Durham, go in, have a drink and say hi to Glenn. End of rant. Now, next up, we're going to again be discussing Endgame, Omid Scobie's book. I'm named in it, so is my next guest, Dickie Arbiter, so there's lots to discuss. Stay tuned for that. Be back in just a jiffy.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new t-shirt. It's your new t-shirt.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Camilla Tominey. Now let's get on to Endgame. The book by Omid Scobie has hit the bookshelves. I'm in it. Why don't I just tell you what he says about me? It talks about the fact that I wrote this piece about, you know, the dog bowl incident where William grabs Harry and they have a fight, and I think he's got him by the lapels, and then he pushes him to the ground, and then quite amusingly he sort of says, don't tell Meghan, don't tell Meghan what's happened. You know, I basically sort of wrote a piece saying, actually, I felt that that demonstrated William's desperate love for his little brother, and this idea that he felt he was losing him to Meghan, and he was sort of so irate about it all that he obviously resorted to violence, which wasn't a good thing. Anyway, Scobie, bless his heart, he's described me as the Telegraph's royal editor. I've never been the Telegraph's royal editor. I'm the associate editor. Facts matter. And he says, this was me apparently bizarrely sounding like the excuses of domestic abusers everywhere. Domestic abusers? Has Omid Scobie understood the notion of sibling rivalry? I've got two older brothers. They were at each other's throats the whole time. I think I was in several headlocks back in the 80s and 90s. It's not a domestic abuse case, is it? Anyway, there's that. I'm going to bring Dickie Arbiter into the conversation now, former press secretary to Queen Elizabeth II. Dickie, you're in the book as well. Are you trashed, or what's said about you?
I can't remember. I skipped over it so quickly.
Forget that. I tell you what, there's another thing in the book about the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, formerly known as the Earl and Countess of Wessex. And it says that an interview took place where they were asked about the Oprah interview, and they said, Oprah who? And he said this was an example of their bigotry. Can I just say, I did that interview with the Earl and Countess of Wessex, as they were then known. That's Sophie and Edward, to the uninitiated. And what they were saying was, I was trying to obviously get a newsline out of them. What do you think of Oprah? And they kind of went, Oprah who? As in, you know, we can't really mention her name because it's all very sensitive. So again, that's taken out of context. Interestingly, you know, the only person at the royal wedding that didn't recognise Oprah, do you know who that was, Dickie?
Probably the King.
Not the King. It was actually the Archbishop of Canterbury. Apparently, he had a 20-minute conversation with Oprah and then left
and hadn't got a clue
the
who she
wedding
was.
and said to his staff at Lambeth Palace afterwards, I had this conversation with this extraordinary woman who seems to be big in America on telly. And they were like, was it Oprah? He was like, oh, that's who it was. Anyway, the point is, I had Tom Bower on the show yesterday, Dickie, and we talked about, you know, Scobie's sources and motivations and all the rest of it. I mean, who do you think his sources are?
God.
Right.
Somebody up there.
Yes.
You know, sources is always very easy to put down in a book because it means that you're safe, you're playing safe.
Yes.
There's some breaking news on this, you know that.
Yeah, go on then, yes. Something's happened in Holland, this book.
It's in Holland, yes. They've had to pulp the publication there because it names whoever was the royal that talked of Archie's skin colour.
Right.
Now, I'm a bit confused because there's sort of talk, was it a royal or was it somebody in the royal household?
Or was it royals, plural? Because Omid's been giving these interviews saying, oh, well, I know who they are, but I haven't put them in the book.
Yeah, well,
and Tom Bower said he had put them in the book. We're not going to mention any names here because, you know, I think legally it's probably unsound to do so. Also, as is ever the case with these books, Finding Freedom and now this, there's no right of reply to the royal family.
None whatsoever, and I think he's done this book because after Finding Freedom, published in 2020, the barrier was down at Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace. He wasn't getting any entry there and getting anything out of them, and therefore he had to find another source of income.
What do you make of the criticisms of the Princess of Wales? I mean, you've been up close and personal with royalty for a long time, Dickie. You know, she's depicted as this kind of Stepford wife, ornament, to be seen and not heard. It seems pretty unfair.
It's very unfair. He seems to be trashing the King, Prince of Wales and the Princess of Wales. They are his bête noire, and he's having a go at everything that they do, that they are allegedly the future of the monarchy, but unless they change their ways, there isn't going to be a monarchy. So he's actually trashing the monarchy. He's trashing the organisation that made him very lucrative living.
Yes. Although, does he have a point on the monarchy needing to modernise and adapt? I mean, to be fair, your former boss, the late Queen, was very, very good at being ahead of the curve. She wanted to innovate and make sure that they were forward-thinking. We have had, I mean, a huge amount of negative publicity about this institution since Megxit in 2020. Does he raise a point about, particularly in light of, for instance, William and Kate's Caribbean tour, that actually the royals can't do this thing that the late Queen did of never complain, never explain?
No, they've got to say something. Now, it's unfortunate in the Caribbean there were errors made, and errors made by the people on the ground in the Caribbean and the people on the ground at Kensington Palace. They should have looked at the optics. It's not rocket science. You look at something, you've got youngsters behind a fence that's about that high, that's not very high. In my day, we would have said, no, you bring them in front.
Yes.
You might do it for a football match. This is not a football match. The other optic that was bad was using a Land Rover that had been used by the Queen and Prince Philip.
And you had the couple on the back of it, and it
all looked so
It would have been
colonial.
better, actually. I think it was the president of Jamaica and his wife, or the Prime Minister of Jamaica, because I haven't gone Republic yet. That's Barbados. And I suggested in a column, you know, have the Prince and Princess of Wales driving.
And the president on the back.
Exactly, because it would have looked a lot better.
Yes.
Let's also talk about the royal reaction to this, because they have just opted for a dignified silence. Keep calm, carry on. It's kind of the epitome of the slogan on the tea towels. Is that the right approach? I mean, would it be beneficial for William and Kate to do some kind of sit down and discuss all this, or is that the way that madness ends?
Let's go back to Margaret Thatcher.
Yes.
When she was having a go at the media and all that publicity for the IRA, she said, do not give them the oxygen of publicity. And the same applies to this. What do you say? Look, I've only read probably a third of the book. I've been working today, so I've been snatching time between. And this third of the book is rehashing stuff that has appeared in newspapers over the past 15 years.
Although that is the stuff of royal legend, Dickie. What's the old expression? It ain't old till it's told.
It ain't old till it's told, but it's been told time and time again. There is nothing new so far.
All right, we'll clear up one thing that's been retold. Does the king have his shoelaces ironed?
No. And does he have his toothpaste squeezed? Look, that story emanated when he broke his arm in 3 places.
Yes.
His arm was in a sling like this.
Yeah.
He couldn't squeeze toothpaste.
Yes.
I had my arm in a sling a few years later because I had an operation on my shoulder. I couldn't squeeze. I had to get my wife to squeeze it for me.
Fair enough.
So, come on, you know, let's this story go away.
But then there was the kind of, I think it was Jeremy Paxman that wrote in his book about having a collection of eggs boiled and then he'd choose one to his liking. I mean, is this a demanding and difficult man,
I have
as
had
Omid
breakfast
suggests?
with him.
Right.
And no, it doesn't happen. If I want an egg 4 minutes, I'm going to sit there with a stopwatch and make sure it's 4 minutes.
I know,
and
but
get
we
it
don't
out.
think the king is boiling his own eggs, let's be perfectly honest. But, OK, I take your point. Also, what about William? He's described by Scobie as being hot-headed, of briefing against his brother to improve his own publicity. Do we believe all that?
No, would you? He would say that, wouldn't he? He's got a beef against the Prince of Wales. He's got a beef against the king, and he's going to say anything in order to make the point that they are not very nice people, and unless they change, we're not going to have a monarchy.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. That's what it's all about. Change, otherwise the monarchy is history.
Would it be good PR for the King and the Prince of Wales, finally, Dickie, to make up with Harry and Meghan? I mean, to take the moral high ground. I know that's really difficult, but we did hear some reports about a Christmas invitation that either was sent or wasn't sent and all the rest of it. It looked as if there was some hope for reconciliation. You know, if the King and Prince William rise above, from a PR perspective, doesn't that make them look stronger?
I'm going to answer a question with a question.
Go on.
You're a parent, and your child has done what Harry's done. What would your reaction be?
I mean, I wouldn't be happy about it. And I think this whole idea of sort of trashing your own family is
Trashing your
appalling,
family
really.
in Oprah, trashing 6 hours on Netflix, a book that sold countless thousands.
Yeah.
Come on.
I know, but you might look at him and think, look, he's damaged, he's got a huge amount of baggage left over from his mother's very tragic death. He's confused. You know, he's married a woman that doesn't really want to be in the UK or have any more ties to the royals. Therefore, they might pity him a little.
But if you give too much, how much of it is going to stay private? How much is going to end up in the media?
Well, probably a lot more to come, Dickie, I'd imagine. I mean, it keeps us in clover, but at the same time, not good for the royals. Dickie Arbiter, thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. Now, I think we have a bit of breaking news. Let's see what this is. Now, Nigel Farage, who would be in this chair were he not in the jungle, has won a press award. He's won Campaign of the Year at the Pagefield Press Awards for his campaign against debanking earlier this year. So congratulations to Nigel. Hopefully you'll be able to catch up with this at some point in the near future. Let's bring Jacob Rees-Mogg into the conversation now. State of the nation to come momentarily. Jacob, what have you got planned?
What are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about, in part, Michael Gove's admission that the coronavirus may have been man-made, and if it was man-made, came from the laboratory in Wuhan, which people like Matthew Ridley, very serious scientific figure, have been arguing is a possibility.
Yes.
And it's fascinating because this was something that was one of the Lunar Tune conspiracy theories to begin with, and gradually the evidence seems to be coming out to indicate that it may well have been a leak from a Chinese lab.
Astonishing. And also, I thought the inquiry's reaction to that. We can't speak about this here.
The inquiry is ridiculous. It seems set on deciding that they should lock down earlier and more aggressively, and don't care about anything else. And any evidence that doesn't relate to that, they're not fussed about. Whereas where it started is fundamental, surely.
Of course it is. And we must answer that question, Jacob. Looking forward to hearing that. Thank you for being with me this evening. As I said, I'm here all week. I'm back tomorrow at 7. Up next, as we just discussed, is Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. The cold weather continues. Quite a few of us having a frosty start tomorrow morning, and for some there'll be some sleet and snow around as well. This area of low pressure just edging down through the North Sea, bringing some gusty winds, but also bringing more showers to northern Scotland and down the eastern side into northeast England, southeast Scotland. 1 or 2 sleet and snow showers may produce a covering through the night, and it could turn icy as temperatures plummet. A few rain showers scattered over the Midlands, Wales, southwest England. A bit more cloud here may just prevent a frost, but really from the Midlands northwards, many areas will be below freezing, rural spots well below freezing, and hence why it could be icy still. Well, we've got these showers coming in tomorrow over northern, northeastern Scotland, southeast Scotland, northeast England. Again, some sleet and snow is likely for a time. The cloud in the south should tend to break up, and so for many it'll be a day of sparkling sunshine, but it will be a cold feeling day. 2 or 3 for many across the north, maybe 5, 6 or 7, and perhaps a little higher in the far southwest. Milder air nudging back in here on Thursday, bringing some wet weather, damp and drizzly. The possibility of some sleet and snow, mostly over the moors in the southwest. Further wintry showers in parts of the east. Again, it could be icy first thing in the morning. But again, for many, it's a dry and a bright day, but it will again be on the cold side with temperatures mostly around 3 or 4 Celsius.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. Michael Gove has let the cat out of the bag, and it's quite a big cat, at the COVID inquiry when he suggests the virus could have been man-made. But the inquiry doesn't care. This comes after suggestions of a cover-up in the US earlier this year, linked the relationships between Western virologists and the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Meanwhile, controversy is unfolding at the Telegraph and Spectator as an Abu Dhabi-backed investment fund headed by Sultan Al Jaber, the COP28 president designate, among other government roles, wants to acquire the two great journalistic institutions. But does this pose conflicting interests for the press? Well, two of our media veterans might just have the answer. As fresh school guidance states teachers won't have to use trans pupils' preferred pronouns, the UK is facing the prospect of being put on a UN naughty step, the UN blacklist, owing to trans lobby campaigners such as, yes, you guessed it, Stonewall. But if the UN is upset with us, surely we're doing something right. And our Prime Minister has snubbed the Greek Prime Minister in a row over a game of marbles, the Elgin marbles to be precise. We'll be discussing that shortly. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my particularly pugnacious panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the author and journalist, Michael Crick. As always, I want to hear from you. It's a crucial part of the programme. Email me, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now, it's what we've all been waiting for, the news of the day with Polly Middlehurst.
Jacob, thank you. Well, the top stories from the GB newsroom tonight. Within the last hour, 12 more Israeli hostages have been released. And for those of you watching on television, the hostages can be seen here, arriving at the Rafah border crossing and being handed to the International Red Cross. Israeli Defence Forces saying 10 Israelis and 2 Thai nationals, we understand, now on their way home to their families. That exchange, part of a commitment to the 5th day of a humanitarian truce with the Hamas terror group. We're also hearing that 30 Palestinian prisoners have been released. It's believed to be made up of 15 women and 15 under 18s. We also understand that a journalist is reportedly among the 30 Palestinians that are going to be released. Meanwhile, the US seems to have changed its approach slightly today, asking Israel to take greater care if there are any future strikes on Gaza. The White House saying civilians and vital infrastructure must be protected. Now, schools could be forced to stay open during strike action under tough new legislation planned by the government. The Education Secretary today said strikes over the last year were some of the most disruptive on record for pupils. Teaching unions have described the plans for minimum service levels, as they're called, as shameful. But Gillian Keegan says it's all about achieving a fair balance. A man has admitted killing 3 people who died in separate attacks in Nottingham earlier this year. Students Barnaby Webber And Grace O'Malley Kumar, both 19 years old, and 65-year-old caretaker Ian Coates died after being stabbed in June. Valdo Calocane, who is also known as Adam Mendes, denied murder but admitted 3 counts of manslaughter on the basis of his diminished responsibility. Thousands attended vigils for the victims in Nottingham in the wake of those attacks. Now, rates of shoplifting are on the rise, with the sharpest increase seen in Conservative constituencies. In 2014, the party changed the law to classify the theft of items under £200 as low-value shoplifting. That meant some police forces disregarded it as petty theft. Well, Shadow Policing Minister Alex Norris told GB News the government hasn't taken the matter seriously enough.
Again, it shows that the decision to cut police was a total disaster. But what we've seen now as those police officers are being added back is that they're often not in the right places. So we're hearing really concerning stories. We see that it tends to be areas with Conservative police and crime commissioners that have the highest rates because there doesn't seem to be the same focus on this.
Meanwhile, shop price inflation has eased for the 6th month in a row as retailers compete fiercely for customers ahead of Christmas. According to the British Retail Consortium, shop prices were 4.3% higher than last November. That's down from October and the lowest inflation rate since June. Food inflation overall also slowed to 7.8% from October. That's the 7th consecutive drop because of lower energy prices feeding into lower costs, particularly for dairy products. Now, if you're getting ready for Christmas and possibly putting up your tree this weekend, tonight you might just get the weather to go along with it. The Met Office is predicting snow in parts of the UK as we head into the start of the new month of December. There's a yellow weather warning in place right now for snow and icy conditions, and it's thought that'll create hazardous driving conditions, particularly in the northeast of England, Yorkshire and parts of Scotland, and that weather warning in place until late tomorrow morning. That's the news on GB News, across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
The Wuhan lab leak theory was once considered a Looney Tune idea, but now seems to be the most probable source of the virus. In March 2020, a group of scientists penned an open letter condemning the, quote, conspiracy theories, suggesting the virus's origin was the Wuhan Institute of Virology. It emerged later one of its key signatories, Peter Daszak, was head of the EcoHealth Alliance, a research group that worked directly with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This was a clear conflict of interest. The then President, Donald Trump, later echoed claims of the Wuhan lab leak theory, and he was lambasted as a conspiracy theorist too, though he did sometimes give people that impression in other areas, so not unreasonably. Indeed, his own chief scientist, Anthony Fauci, undermined Trump, referring to a study consistent with the jump of a species from an animal to a human. In February 2021, the World Health Organization suggested the lab leak theory was, quote, extremely unlikely, despite serious questions about the limited access permitted by the Chinese Communist Party for the investigation. It later emerged that American federal funding was provided to the Wuhan Institute of Virology for virus research. A dispute took place between Senator Rand Paul and Anthony Fauci over whether the funding could have been used to create COVID-like viruses. And now we know that 2 US agencies, the Department of Energy and the FBI, have concluded with some confidence that the virus originated in a lab. Indeed, as the likes of Matthew the Lord Ridley have pointed out, there were obvious components to the structural nature of the virus that were unusual and suggested some form of human intervention. The evidence clearly points to the likelihood that the virus came from a lab. In other words, the conspiracy theorists seem to have been on the right track. Earlier this year, the former US Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, said this to a US congressional committee when asked why government scientists were reluctant to entertain the idea of the lab leak.
I think the best evidence of that is their own conversations, which say that they didn't want unwarranted or unwanted, or they think the term was unwanted attention to the relationships that were taking place between Western virologists and those working within the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
So here we have the former Director of National Intelligence claiming the reason government scientists were keen to dispel suggestions of a lab leak was because of their own personal links to the lab in question. But these problems extend to the UK. Michael Gove gave credence to the idea this morning, but he was very quickly shut down.
There is a significant body of judgment that believes that the virus itself was man-made, and that presents a set of challenges as well.
Forms no part of the terms of reference of this inquiry, Mr. Gove, to address that somewhat divisive issue. So we're not going to go there.
But why not? Why wasn't the question of the lab leak theory included in the terms of reference of the inquiry? It's the foundational question. Yet this very expensive inquiry just wants to conclude that we ought to have locked down sooner and more brutally. Anything that does not fit in with its predetermined narrative is excluded, including the source of the virus. If we're to restore public trust in the post-COVID world, the question of the lab leak must be at the forefront of the COVID inquiry. We must also ensure that lockdowns never happen again. As always, I want to hear from you, mailmog@gbnews.com. But I'm particularly pleased to be joined this evening by Professor Angus Dalgleish, oncologist at St George's University of London. Angus, thank you very much for coming in. It's interesting, isn't it? Because when the lab leak theory was first discussed, it was thought to be beyond the realms of possibility. It was thought to be by people who are hostile to China and believed in any conspiracy theory. But now increasing evidence has come forward for it being the case.
Well, it certainly has, but it's been very slow. And at the very beginning, I worked with colleagues in Norway, Børge Sorensen, with whom I've been working and developing an HIV vaccine, which actually the phase 2 trials were very, very good. And it was a unique way of going about making a vaccine, completely the opposite of all the ones that had failed. So when the COVID sequence became available, he said, let's collaborate and form a group together, and we'll use the same principles to make a COVID vaccine. And then he called me, he said, I'm a bit concerned that this virus is very odd. And so we started to look a bit further, and he came up with the fact that there were at least 6 inserts genetically inserted into that virus, only one of which at any time could really have happened by natural mutation. To have 6 was extremely unlikely. In no time at all, we found evidence of the insertion having been described as far back as 2013 by people in the Wuhan laboratories. And interestingly, it was a group funded by Peter Daszak, who got the money from their NIAID. So when we pointed this out, that this was extremely unlikely to be a random event, because the impact of these sequences was to give the virus a charge, a massive magnetic charge, likening it to a magnet. So it would immediately latch onto the cell and much more likely to infect the cell and establish an infection. And this is what they had been working on under the guise that should this ever occur as a pandemic, they would have insights for the vaccine. But the irony is if they hadn't been doing that work, it wouldn't have escaped and we wouldn't have needed any vaccine.
And had they done any work in terms of developing the vaccine, or had they merely done the work on developing the virus, as you understand it?
At the time, we didn't know anything about any work on the vaccine, but now it is very clear that they were working on a vaccine, and there are reports, I haven't seen the primary data, that Moderna was involved with patents before September. And I'm saying this is just reports. But it does appear that they were working on what you require to make vaccines at that stage.
And perhaps you could explain the inserts to me again, because this is a very complicated point, that when you have a normal virus, a new virus, what do you mean by inserts that may have come from natural causes?
Well, this was basically a bat virus. The majority of it was a bat virus. But they put bits on top by sewing in different RNAs from other viruses. Now, this is crucially important because the people involved sewing RNA, that all came out of an American laboratory, a chap called Barrick.
OK. I mean, this is very important but very complicated.
Yes.
So, in normal modifications, in a virus that jumps the species barrier, you might get one additional piece of RNA that would come into the virus that would allow it to jump the barrier. and this one had 5, and therefore you have to assume that some of them at least were sewn in by a laboratory, that's the only way to do it. Am I understanding you correctly?
That is the absolute right conclusion. The interesting thing about the Barrick, who appears on all the papers, he perfected this technique and he was the best in the world at it. So he was making the inserts for them and giving them to the Wuhan lab then to see if it was more infectious. And then they would do another one and make it more infectious. So that's what was going on. You allude to something which is really, really important. If this had come from a bat to an intermediate, to a pangolin or a dog or something like that, there would have been evidence of this, because when a virus jumps from one species to another, it doesn't come fully equipped to infect that. It jumps back and forward, and you can see evidence of this infection from taking blood samples. Now, they did this in Wuhan, and there was no evidence of any infection before the outbreak. So the virus came out of that lab absolutely primed 100% to infect human cells, whereas a natural jump would have taken ages and you'd have found evidence of the jumping going on for months beforehand.
So within the virus itself, there is a sort of fingerprint that shows how it was developed. There are also questions about the biosecurity at the Wuhan lab, which certainly Matthew Ridley's written about. Are those things that you're concerned about too, or do you think that is not the key problem?
No, I mean, I think that they all contribute to the fact that why it escaped. I mean, and we have done
But escaped, no one thinks it's deliberate. No one thinks that there was an effort to do this and it got out of control, or that it was a policy.
I think we were very kind saying it escaped, because there were 6 well-documented instances of SARS-1 escaping from really high-security labs, 4 in China, 1 in Taiwan and 1 in Singapore. So it was not uncommon. The thing about the Wuhan lab, it had been inspected and had a woeful assessment of being slapdash and not containing viruses very well, and that it was an accident waiting to happen.
And what do the people who don't agree with this say? What's the Chinese government line? It's saying it didn't happen like this, and other scientists are still saying this didn't happen. How much of a chance is there of that, in your view? Is that a reasonable view?
No, I think it's completely unreasonable. They still keep coming up and saying, oh, they found a raccoon with a very similar virus miles away. But this is all too late. You would have found that in the trail. We know the original virus came 1,000 miles away from a cave. Matt Ridley describes this really well in his book. And they brought it back, and then they started in molecularly sewing it up to try and make it more infectious to the human cells. And that is what they were doing, and they had perfected it at the time it escaped. And there's just no... You would have a trail as long as your hand is... as long as your arm...
All right.
Whatever, but we couldn't find it.
Thank you very much, Professor Dalgleish. Coming up, rows break out over whether an Abu Dhabi-backed firm should be able to buy the Telegraph newspapers, and my panel will get their teeth and their intellect into that. And don't forget, the Prime Minister has seemingly snubbed his Greek counterpart over a row over the return of the Elgin marbles. We'll be having a debate on that for this evening's denouement.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country.
only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is State of the Nation. We've been discussing the Wuhan lab leak theory, and you've been sending in your views. Carter says, if the Chinese leaked COVID from the Wuhan laboratory, when can we expect reparations to be paid? And Jenny says, one wonders who that supercilious and condescending lawyer was who chided Michael Gove, quite impertinently and inappropriately, during the inquiry. God help this country from the legal profession, who increasingly appear to be governing us these days, rather than the elected House. Supercilious and condescending. He should keep his supercilium in better order. I agree with Jenny. Many people want to buy the Telegraph, and I don't mean every day from the new standards. They want to buy the whole thing, lock, stock and barrel, including GB News' primary investor, Sir Paul Marshall, who has publicly thrown his hat into the ring, along with Lord Rothermere, who owns the Daily Mail, and the multimedia group National World, owned and operated by former local World Trinity Mirror boss David Montgomery. Rupert Murdoch apparently wants to buy The Spectator on its own. So it's no surprise that the Telegraph is a popular opportunity for these investors, and any of them would make a credible owner of such a strong franchise. It has a central position in British politics as the Tory party's in-house journal. Its nickname is the Torygraph, after all. Yet does it matter if instead of being owned by individuals or corporations, it were to be owned by a foreign state? The UAE, the United Arab Emirates, after all, is a friendly ally, closely connected to the United Kingdom, not only through government, but also through the royal family. And we have many shared interests and investments at home and abroad. But would it be right for them to own one of the country's most important newspapers? After all, there's no free media in Abu Dhabi, and the ultimate owner and controller would be Sultan Al Jaber, who is a cabinet minister and president-designate of COP28. When I was minister, I wasn't allowed by propriety and ethics to buy a small stake in a Catholic periodical because of the supposed conflict of interest. If that is the domestic